For decades, the big question wasn't if China would overtake the United States as the world's largest economy. It was when. Back in the 90s, China's economy was just a fraction of America's. By 2010, it was number 2. And by 2020, economists were betting China would take the top spot within a decade, maybe even sooner. The rise seemed unstoppable. China was growing at 10% a year, America at 2%. The math was simple. It was just a matter of time. But then, something unexpected happened. China's growth engine started to sputter. The American economy proved to be surprisingly resilient. And now, the predictions have completely flipped. Some economists are saying China might never overtake America, that its moment has passed. So, what's the real story? Will China become number 1? When? Or is the race already over? Before we dive into the data, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you want to understand the economic battle that will define our century, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because whether China wins or not will affect everything. Trade, technology, military power, even the value of your money and your job. First, let's look at where things stand right now. Who has the bigger economy depends on how you measure it. In what we call nominal terms, using current exchange rates, America is way ahead. The US GDP is around $29 trillion. While China's is about 18.8 trillion. That makes America's economy roughly 50% larger. This is the number most people use, and by this measure, America is the clear winner. But there's another method called purchasing power parity, or PPP. This adjusts for the fact that a dollar buys you a lot more in Beijing than it does in New York. Housing, labor, and services are all cheaper in China. When you adjust for this, the picture changes completely. By PPP, China's economy has actually been bigger than America's since 2017. This is important because real production, the kind you need for building ships or manufacturing weapons, is better reflected by PPP. So which number is right? Well, they both are. Nominal GDP matters for global finance. PPP matters for industrial and military muscle. But for the big question of when will China overtake the US, most people focus on nominal GDP. And by that measure, China is falling further behind, not catching up. In 2021, China's economy was 77% the size of America's. Now it's down to about 65%. What happened? Two things: currency exchange rates and different growth rates. The US Federal Reserve raised interest rates, which made the dollar stronger and the Chinese yuan weaker. When you convert China's GDP into weaker yuan, it just looks smaller in dollar terms. The second factor is that while China's economy grew faster in real terms, America had higher inflation, which artificially puffed up its nominal GDP numbers. These are temporary factors, but they cloud the real picture. What truly matters is long-term, real growth. Now let's look at the optimistic case for China, the one that says it will still overtake the US in the next decade or so. First, even with its slowdown, China's economy is still growing about twice as fast as America's. Simple math says it will eventually close the gap. Second, the currency effects could reverse. If the yuan strengthens, China's GDP in dollar terms will jump overnight. Third, China has huge advantages: a massive population, a dominant manufacturing sector, and control over key supply chains. Fourth, it's already a leader in critical future industries like electric vehicles, solar power, and 5G. But now, let's consider the pessimistic case, the one that's gaining a lot of traction. First, China's demographics are a ticking time bomb. The working-age population is shrinking, and the country is getting old before it gets rich. Fewer workers and more retirees is a recipe for economic stagnation, just like Japan experienced. Second, China is in the middle of a massive property crisis. The real estate boom that fueled its growth for decades is over, leaving behind ghost cities and mountains of debt. Third, Chinese consumers are famously cautious savers. Despite government efforts, they just aren't spending enough to power the economy. And finally, the country is drowning in debt, which is now choking off new, productive investment. So, when you weigh both sides, the once certain outcome of China becoming number 1 is now a genuine question mark. The path ahead is filled with challenges, from demographic decline to a deep-seated property crisis. The era of inevitable Chinese dominance seems to be over. Hey everyone, let's talk about the big question. Will China's economy ever overtake America's? For a while, it seemed inevitable. But now, the picture is much more complicated. Let's break down why. First, there's the middle income trap. It's a common problem where a country grows fast by moving from farming to manufacturing, but then gets stuck. To get to the next level, you need real innovation, not just imitation. Think about countries like Brazil or Turkey. They hit a ceiling. China is right at that threshold now, and history shows breaking through is incredibly tough. Then, there's the tech war with the US. America has restricted China's access to the most advanced computer chips. These chips are the brains behind everything from AI to next-gen industries. China is pouring money into making its own, but building a semiconductor industry takes decades of expertise. Without top-tier chips, China's tech progress could hit a wall. We're also seeing capital flight. Wealthy Chinese are moving their money out of the country. Why? They're worried about unpredictable government policies. When a giant company like Ant Financial can be shut down overnight, it sends a chilling message to investors. This erodes confidence and weakens the economy from within. And you can't ignore the youth unemployment crisis. Before the government stopped publishing the data, the official rate was over 21%. Some estimates suggest the real number could be closer to 50%. You have a generation of educated young people who can't find jobs that match their skills. That's not just a waste of talent, it's a sign of deep systemic problems. On top of all that, America's economy has been surprisingly resilient. Despite predictions of decline, the US keeps bouncing back. Its tech sector is booming, it's a major energy exporter, and its GDP growth has been stronger than expected. It's a moving target, making it that much harder for China to catch up. So, where does that leave us? The pessimistic view is that China's growth will slow dramatically and it might never catch the US. Some even say China's economy peaked relative to America's back in 2021. But let's look at the recent numbers. China's economy did grow by 5% last year, driven by strong exports of things like electric cars and solar panels. They are moving up the tech ladder. However, people at home aren't spending as much as hoped, and the property market is still in trouble. So, it's a very mixed picture. What do the experts predict now? The forecasts are all over the place. Some say China will overtake the US by the mid-2030s. Others have pushed that date to 2040, 2050, or even say it might never happen. The consensus seems to be that if a crossover happens, it's much further away than we once thought. But why does this even matter? It's not just about bragging rights. For the last 80 years, America's position as the world's largest economy has given it immense global power. The US dollar is the world's currency, American companies set global trends, and its military is unmatched. Economic size translates directly into geopolitical influence. If China's GDP becomes larger, that balance of power could shift. The yuan could challenge the dollar. Chinese tech standards could become the global norm. We're already seeing countries start to hedge their bets, getting closer to China. If China decisively pulls ahead, this hedging could turn into a full-on realignment of the global order. America still holds powerful cards. The dollar's dominance, its leading tech companies, top universities, and vast military alliances. These advantages won't vanish overnight, but a changing economic landscape will erode them over time. So this economic race is about much more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about who sets the rules for the 21st century. The outcome will shape the world our children and grandchildren live in. It's a fascinating and incredibly important story to follow. Ready to dive into the real battlegrounds of the US-China rivalry? Forget the overall GDP numbers for a moment. The real story is in the details, where each country leads and where the fight is fiercest. Let's start with manufacturing. China is an absolute titan, producing nearly a third of the world's goods, compared to America's 17%. When it comes to things like steel, electronics, solar panels, and shipbuilding, China's lead is massive. They build more ships than the rest of the world combined and churn out 80% of all solar panels. This gives China incredible strategic depth, allowing it to produce military gear faster in a conflict and withstand supply chain shocks. America's manufacturing, while smaller, is still a heavyweight in high-value areas like aircraft, advanced machinery, and pharmaceuticals. But the trend is worrying for the US, with manufacturing jobs declining and critical supply chains now rooted in China. Now technology, This is where the competition is most intense. Both nations are pouring money into AI, quantum computing, and advanced semiconductors. America still has the edge in breakthrough tech, with Silicon Valley's innovation and its tech giants dominating the market. But China is catching up at lightning speed. Companies like Alibaba and Tencent are major players in AI, and their facial recognition tech is world-class. The real linchpin, though, is semiconductors. Taiwan makes the most advanced chips, and both superpowers depend on them. America has restricted China's access to chip-making tech, and China is scrambling to build its own industry. Whoever wins the semiconductor race by 2030 will likely lead in everything from AI to military systems. What about finance? Here, America's advantage is enormous. The US dollar is the king of international transactions, used in over 84% of all trades. American financial markets are the deepest and most liquid on the planet. China's yuan is barely a blip on the global radar, used in less than 5% of transactions. This financial dominance gives the US powerful leverage, like the ability to impose sanctions by cutting off access to the dollar. China is trying to build alternatives like its own payment system and a digital yuan, but they have a long way to go to challenge the dollar's reign. Next up, energy. China is the world's biggest energy consumer and relies heavily on imports, creating a major vulnerability. To counter this, they're building massive energy reserves and have become the world leader in renewable energy, from solar to wind to electric vehicles. Meanwhile, the US has become energy independent thanks to fracking, which gives it more geopolitical freedom. When we look at military power, America currently holds the top spot with a bigger budget and more advanced weapons. But China's military is growing rapidly. It now has the world's largest navy by number of ships and is developing advanced missiles and stealth aircraft. Military power often follows economic power, so if China's economy keeps growing, its military might will too. This brings us to demographics, which could be the ultimate decider. America's population is still growing, thanks in part to immigration. China's population, however, has started to shrink. A smaller workforce could mean slower economic growth for decades. It's a huge headwind for China, and while technology might help, it's a serious challenge. So, what does the future hold? There are a few possible scenarios. In one, China's economy overtakes America's by 2035, shifting the global balance of power. In another, it happens later, around 2045, giving the world more time to adjust. And in a third scenario, it never happens at all. China's growth could stall due to its demographic and debt problems, while the US economy remains dynamic. Just a few years ago, most experts predicted China would pull ahead. Now they're not so sure. The only certainty is that the next few decades will be incredibly consequential. So, what does all this mean for you, personally? Because this isn't just some abstract geopolitical debate. The outcome affects your life in very real ways. If you're American, a world where China is the largest economy means less American influence. Allies might become less reliable. Our military dominance could shrink. The dollar's status as the world's reserve currency could erode. This might lead to higher interest rates, a lower standard of living, and less economic security. Your money would be worth less, imports would cost more, and jobs could be less secure as Chinese companies outcompete American ones. The global system would no longer automatically favor American interests, but it wouldn't be a disaster. Look at Britain. It remained a wealthy nation after America surpassed it economically. The average Brit's life didn't collapse. The country just had less global influence. America could follow a similar path. If you're Chinese, your country overtaking America would be a moment of huge national pride. It would be seen as a validation of the system, a sign of greater international respect, and the final reversal of the century of humiliation. But your personal life might not change that much, at least not right away. GDP per capita would still be much lower than in America. You'd live in a bigger economy but remain individually poorer than the average American. And if you're from another country, this competition creates both opportunities and risks. You can play both sides to attract investment and get better deals, but you also risk getting caught in the middle. Developing countries might benefit most, as both America and China offer aid and investment to win influence. But if this competition turns into a Cold War or worse, a hot conflict, everyone suffers. global trade gets disrupted, supply chains break, and the world becomes a poorer, more dangerous place. Let's look at specific industries. Tech companies are on the front lines. They have to choose which market to prioritize. China, which is huge but requires government cooperation, or America, which is wealthy but increasingly restrictive. Some, like Apple and Tesla, try to operate in both, but that's getting harder. Eventually, companies might have to pick a side. Financial services face uncertainty about the dollar's future. If the yuan gains ground, banks will need to adapt. Manufacturing is already shifting, with companies diversifying their supply chains out of China, the China Plus One strategy. Energy companies, on the other hand, might benefit from the competition, as both nations will want to secure their energy supplies, driving up prices. So, what should investors consider? Diversification is more important than ever. You want exposure to both Chinese growth and American assets to cover your bases. And think about currency hedging, as the dollar-yuan exchange rate will likely become more volatile. Defense stocks might do well no matter what, as both countries are increasing military spending. Now the big question, will there be a war? Economic competition doesn't always lead to military conflict, but history shows that power transitions are dangerous times. The biggest flashpoint is Taiwan. If China feels strong enough to take Taiwan by force, it could lead to a direct conflict with the US. Rational leaders would avoid such a catastrophe, but nationalism isn't always rational. So, based on all this, here's my assessment. China probably will not overtake the US in nominal GDP before 2040. Its demographic and property market problems are just too severe. It will keep growing faster than America, but not fast enough to close the gap quickly. By 2035, China's economy might be about 85% of America's. After 2040, it's anyone's guess. The yuan will become more important, but it won't replace the dollar as the world's reserve currency anytime soon, and we'll see technology split into two spheres, an American one and a Chinese one. For your own planning, get ready for a multipolar world with more competition and less stability, but not necessarily a catastrophic war. Maybe we're asking the wrong question. It might not matter which country is number one. What matters is whether we can build a world where major powers compete economically but cooperate on global challenges like climate change and pandemics. The real test isn't about which country wins. It's about whether we're smart enough to build a system where multiple large powers can coexist peacefully. What do you think? Will China overtake America? And does it even matter? Let me know in the comments.